Hey internets, how are you guys doing? We are running a couple errands, so I figured I would go live and sort of talk about the next book in the series. But before we do that, real quick, for those who have been asking, my new machine is running perfectly well. I've been able to edit video and do a lot of coding and basically catch up on client work that I wasn't able to do before. That's going to take me a week or so to get ready to get finished with. So we'll wind up doing, I'll do video and show you the machine. And, you know, I have these nice slow pans and videography and stuff that I've done. Wow, this jacket's a lot louder than the hoodies I'm used to. Anyway, so where were we? All right, next book in the series. So the next one has got to be, I'm going to kind of pair them really. But I read the Fountainhead before I read Atlas Shrugged. So these are the Ayn Rand novels. I believe Fountainhead was 1947 or something, and Atlas was 53 or 54. I could be wrong in the exact dates. But so by the time I read Atlas Shrugged, we had to be into, you know, I don't know, coming up on 1980, right? Born in 66. I think I was 13 or 14, maybe going on 15 when I first read the book. And to say that it changed the course of my life would be a slight understatement. Now, people saying Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead changed their lives tends to pull in a lot of hate mail. I'll get it on this video for sure, whether it be Facebook or YouTube. And you'll see a lot of impotent sort of anti-Rand rage out there. Much of it ill-informed, and obviously she's open to, there's a lot of legitimate debate and discussion to be had about both the quality of her writing, her choice of topics. She tends to, particularly in Atlas, kind of run off on these long monologues. Like most political authors who wind up writing fiction, they really sort of construct circumstances that their characters use as an excuse to expound upon political philosophy and whatever. And she does that with varying degrees of success. I happen to find Fountainhead more successful as a purely enjoyable novel, and Atlas is probably significantly clearer as a political screed. Fountainhead is more of what you would call a traditional noir romance, and Atlas Shrugged, if anything, is slightly dystopian science fiction in the sort of vein of Brave New World or Things to Come. Maybe, if you want to go that way, very old school, classic sci-fi. So, yeah, but in any case, a complete breakdown of objectivism and why that philosophy works for me, even as an adult, as opposed to just when I was a youth, is well beyond the scope of the video we're doing here right now, though we will almost certainly tackle it in a couple of parts on herd watching, but a lot of people have done it. But here's one of those places where it's hard to separate my personal development as a person from my political beliefs, and I'm not going to try. So if you find this too political for this vlog, I don't know what you thought you were going to come across when we were talking about philosophies and books that had a major impact on my life, but we can't not talk about ethics, morality, and as those things shade into politics. In any case, here's the core thesis that you can take away from Fountainhead and or Atlas Shrugged, or that I took away as a young man. One, it is absolutely ethically defensible to care about the things you care about first. And by things, I mean things, people, relationships, yourself, and those around you. Now, there's a lot more sophistication to Rand's theories than she gets in the sort of anti-Rand memes that show up all over the place. But in this particular instance, what I mean is, you know, if I have, you know, if there's no food in the world, then I have 5 hot dogs, and I have myself, a wife, and 2 children, that's 4 hot dogs. And if there's there are a million people in the world around me, I can give the fifth hot dog to... So it's okay for me to want to feed myself, my wife, and my kids, to value the people I love more highly than strangers. It is acceptable for me to feed my family first and then figure out where I'm going to give the fifth hot dog from among those people who may have helped or hindered my family. So I'm not going to give the hot dog to the guy who's been trying to get my wife alone in the woods for the last couple of years. And I am going to give the hot dog to the doctor who helped when I was sick and will help the next time I get sick. I know that doesn't sound like a radical idea, but when you look at the opposing philosophies that are pervasive in the world, this idea that you are absolutely morality bound to give up the things that you care about in favor of total strangers, that there's some ethical and moral equivalence that requires you to say, hey, that random stranger out in the world is exactly of the same value when I make my decisions as the people I love or myself, because, no human being is worth more than another human being, and thus it's impossible to put a value on human beings. And anything you do that attempts to put a comparative value on human beings is inherently wrong and exploitive and abusive or whatever. That attack on exceptionalism is at the core of Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead. The pushback against that. Now, the mechanism by which Rand does that is the romantic, ideal, exceptional human being. The idea that if you look through philosophy, if you look through history, you will find that there are individual humans who have advanced humanity dramatically. And yes, they build on the work of others. And yes, no man is an island. And yes, Thomas Edison took advantage of everything around him. And yes, Ben Franklin took advantage of the world around him. And yes, the men who framed the U.S. Constitution were part of a larger movement of political thought. And yes, King Leonidas of Sparta was just one of a long line of Spartan kings. Yes, you can knock anybody down, and you can attempt to marginalize the singular brilliance of certain individuals because they didn't invent everything from oxygen and water to the table they sat on and the clothes they wore up purely on their own. But that being said, there's no way around the fact that if you lock 1,000 people in a room, the odds are it will be 2 or 3 of those people who are responsible for the organization, survival, and ultimate escape of those people. And it will not be, and if you picked 3 of those people in that room at random to put them in charge of those things, you will not get the same outcome that you would if you picked the best among them. So there is this concept of innate talent. There is this concept of innate intelligence, or artistry, or musical ability, or dance ability. And that concept, that idea of exceptionalism and talent matters. Now, Rand uses exceptional people as her protagonists, as many people do, from George Lucas to, Plato. They don't just pick average random people. They embody their ideals within someone, and then they go with that. So it's very common for people to look at someone who has an Ayn Rand, a pro-Rand view, and say, well, it's easy to be pro-Rand when you think you're some superhuman genius beset upon all sides by the dregs of humanity, trying to parasitically steal your stuff. And of course it is. But the philosophy holds even if you are perfectly aware of the fact that you're a fairly normal human being, kind of going through a world full of fairly normal human beings. Because the philosophy is not based on the value of exceptional people. It is based on the value of every individual to pursue their self-interest. It's simply best illustrated when we look at exceptional people. So what does that mean? It means that you are ethically allowed to consider your interests and your judgment first, and that you are not, in fact, beholden to the world at large. And more importantly, that so considering that is not only not a flaw, but it is, in Ayn's view, the only mechanism by which any human being has for making a judgment. And that, in totality, that struck me so powerfully when I was young, because I was that way. You know, you look at the world around you, and if you're a certain type of person, you come to the conclusion that you're going to take everybody's input, and you're going to take guidance, and you're going to take education, and you're going to take their ideas. But push comes to shove, you are going to use those things to inform your own decision-making process. In the end, I will make my decision. I will choose, and I will live with the consequences of my choice. And that is fine. That it is not wrong to say, I understand that you know a lot, and I appreciate all your information, and I understand these things, but I am going to judge. I'm going to decide. And even in 1980, 1980, when I was coming to this and in the public school system as someone who felt this way, there was an enormous amount of pressure around me to say, what makes you think you have the right and ability to make these decisions for yourself? Why don't you let the experts tell you what the right idea is? Why don't you bow to the consensus of the people around you? We were, at the time, locked in a philosophical struggle in a way that people today really don't understand, between capitalism and communism. And communism was being justified in America as sort of that, the wisdom of the masses and their moral right to demand everything you owned. And if anything, you have to understand objectivism and Rand's novels in that context, and as a response to socialism, communism, or collectivism in every form. That idea that if you work hard out in the fields and you manage to toil and work and use your sweat and your intellect and your talent, and you wind up growing 10 carrots, that it is not in fact you who has the right to choose where those carrots go, then inherently all of that work becomes the property of the state or the collective, and it will be distributed as you see it. And you see that today in the idea that no matter how much you work, no matter how much you might make or more talented you have by the sweat of your own brow, that nobody needs more than X thousands of dollars a year, and that we should just tax everything that you make above that at 100% and give it to the people next to you. There's so much more in that. But as I've grown and matured in my thinking, I've seen more depth and more applicability of that philosophy as I go. And the more I learned of the world and the workings of the world around me in politics and interpersonal relationships and the way large groups of humans deal with each other, the clearer it became that Ayn Rand had the struggle that's played out across humanity and across history between the collectivists and essentially the forces who would take away from you your individual right to hold your own ethics, ideals, and values and subsume those to the group, and those who wish to preserve that individual right set. Now, by the way, I don't believe that the collectivists and those that push collectivism are, in fact, truly collectivists, in the sense that I don't think they're thinking for the group as a whole. I happen to think they're just pushing collectivism as the easiest mechanism for them to drive the obedience and subservience of masses of people behind them, and that they will use that as, and that they historically have used that really as their way to acquire the resources they need. And we'll talk about that as a capitalism versus communism thing another time. Yes, Isaiah, am I saying that right? Or is it Isiah? Oof, buddy, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. But yes, carrots are not bad. I'm not a big carrot fan, honestly. But, you know, the point stands. Well, we could go with bacon, if that's a more sort of applicable thing for a lot of people. I happen to like bacon. But in any case, So there you go. You're 16 or 13 or 12 in my case. And yes, of course, the Randian, it's okay to be selfish, small s, without the ethical overpinnings. Yes, there's a lot of that, idea that it's going to appeal to a 16-year-old. In the same way that when you're, not out there earning a living, the Bernie Sanders tax the people that make money and use it to pay for everybody else's college education stuff makes sense. So yes, is it very easy as a 14-year-old to imagine that you are, one of the John Galts of the world? Of course it is. But that's not all there is to it. And, as I've grown, I've found it more applicable, not less, dramatically more, and not less applicable. You don't need to be John Galt. You don't need to be an exceptional titan of industry or a genius to still know and want to make your own decisions about your life, to not be attacked for that, and to be able to achieve the best you can and be in control of the things you create. That's not bad. It's not. And you twin that with another concept that comes through loud and clear in the book, that time, the most basic commodity of your life is your time. We spend our time, as humans, we have to spend time every day to live. We need food. We need shelter from the elements. We need defense from other animals. We don't have claws. We don't have big teeth. We cannot fly. We are not covered in armor. For humans, our primary defense against the world around us is our time and our effort. We are smart enough and we have enough time that we will build a wall or sharpen a stick and build a spear. We will make a fire. And these things are what protect us. So in a very real way, you wake up every day as a human being with a debt of time to be paid before you go to sleep that night to keep yourself alive. In the old days, that meant you got up and you farmed your own food. You got up and made your own clothes. You got up and went out and hunted an animal to try and get a fur. It meant you stood watch in your cave every night with a sharp stick while other people slept, and you traded off that effort. And that simply evolved as time went on to capitalism. It's, I do what I do so that I can make money, so I give it to people who do what they do, which means the X number of hours a day I spend working, I have that time because I don't have to farm, because other people farm, and we exchange their food for what I do. I write computer code, so somewhere there's a farmer who uses a computer program that I wrote. He interacts with it either on the web or with another vendor or himself directly, and that was our barter. We just don't know each other. He grows my food. I write the code that allows the factory to build the tractors he used. And that disconnected barter through the medium of monetary exchange was also something that was really interesting to me. And I'm always been conscious from then on of this idea that time is the thing I trade every day as a human being to be alive. The more successful I am, the more time I have for myself, the more that if I was working, I'm very conscious of the fact that in the dark ages I would have been working sun up to sundown just to stay alive, and that there would be maybe a very small amount of time at meals or in the afternoons for me to have just for a kick back and relax. And that in a very real way, the history of civilization is the history of having more leisure time, or time, not maybe even leisure, but to pursue things that are more aligned with our talent, skill, and goal than just whatever we needed to do to survive. So in any case, these things at 13 and 14 were pivotal. That it is okay to care about the things you care about first. That it is okay to care about the people you care about first, starting with yourself. And that further, it is completely reasonable and to everyone's benefit to have the maximum freedom to exchange what I do best and what I want to do with someone else who does something else, and that between the two of us, we both win. The farmer gets time to play World of Warcraft or whatever computer game he wants to play that, somebody like me had a hand in, and I get to write computer code instead of, live on the land and deal with horses and animals, which I don't like to do. Those ideas came through. And you'll notice I say it's okay, that it's acceptable to do these things. And that's critical, because I did not get the idea that I have the right to make judgments about my life from Ayn Rand. I did not get the idea from her that I have the right to keep what I build. That didn't come from her. That was intrinsic. I have known that since I was old enough to form the thoughts. What Rand did for me and for hundreds of thousands of other people was she gave voice to the objections and the counter forces that we would be subject to over our lives. She introduced us to the counter arguments. Oh, what makes you think you're special? Oh, why do you think you have the right to have 5 potatoes if there's someone next to you who needs one? Oh, why do you think that you're special just because you can dance and sing and that person can't dance and sing? Why do you have the right to consider yourself better at that than they do? Why do you continually insist on using your own judgment when the world around you is telling you that you're wrong? Who are you? You could basically sum up the entire objections that you will be subject to as an individualist as, who do you think you are? And by introducing those objections and by examining them and showing the conclusions that they lead to, it was critical and very helpful to a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old person. It was very, very nice to see that and to come across it later in life. At 17 and 16, when I, ran into a sociology professor who spent an entire semester pushing the value of collectivism in exactly that same mechanism, with exactly the arguments that I knew were coming, and that might have been, and obviously are, broadly effective. Would I have been able to avoid them on my own? Would I have avoided sort of being torn down by that unspoken pressure around me? I like to think so, but I'm also deeply grateful that I was not unarmed when I walked into those circumstances, that I had been thinking about it for a couple of years, and I'd examined the ideas. I didn't just take Rand's word for it. I went and read some of the other works. I read, by that time I'd read Adam Smith, I'd read some other people. I had dipped my toe by 16 into some of the writings of Mao and some of Stalin's stuff, and some of these people's. I'm not myopic. I want to know what I'm objecting to and what's in opposition, because maybe I'm wrong. But it was Rand who gave me the words first. It was Rand who intellectually reached a hand out through the medium of those books. Fountainhead more than Atlas. I went and read Atlas, but the impact really happened from Fountainhead, though it would have happened had I gone the other way around. It was Ayn Rand who reached that hand out and said, it's not bad, that it's okay, that they will attack you for this, but here's why you can stand fast. You are not alone, because that is the primary weapon. The primary weapon of those who will come against you as an individualist is to try and tear down your faith in yourself, and to try and tear down your reliance on your own mind. And it was nice to have backup at the time. And the friends I made in high school all reinforced that, though many of them did not become Rand fans. They found her hyperbolic, they found her a little bit over the top. They didn't buy into the ideas in totality, but everyone I surrounded myself with understood the idea of exceptionalism, understood the idea of individuality, and understood the primacy of an individual's right to his or her own time and thought. And that was useful. In any case, from the standpoint of books that influenced me as a young man, that's Fountainhead and, by extension, Atlas Shrugged. As a young individualist, as a budding capitalist, as someone who believed in the power and thought process of my own mind, and believed, though I didn't necessarily always have the words, in what, as Rand said, was the fact that anyone tells you they're not using their own mind and making their own judgments is lying anyway. Everyone who says I'm not making my own choices, I'm accepting the will of the group. Everyone who looks you in the eye and claims to be a collectivist, who is purely working for the benefit of others. Every politician who's ever put a hand up and go, this is not for me, that I'm only doing this for the rest of you, is lying to you, is bullshitting you. What you really want is a politician whose motives you understand and agree with, who is absolutely doing what they're doing to advance an agenda, but it's just an agenda that you consider to be reasonable. And it's always been the same. It's the same in business. Don't ever trust anyone who's going, oh, I'm not making any money on this. I'm doing this as a favor to you. I don't trust that person. Unless I have reason to know that they would do me a favor. But if it's a random guy at a car dealership, bullshit. I'd much rather you just tell me where you're making the money. I don't mind you making money. If you're like, hey, I'm going to cut you, a couple % off on the thing, but, in order to do that, you got to use my bank because I'm going to make $1,000 kickback from writing the loan this month. Great, let's do that thing. Don't bullshit me. Let's figure it out. We can find a win-win here. In any case, that was the impact of Ayn Rand. So if illusions gave me whatever prototypical spirituality I wound up with, if Starship Troopers gave me the idea of the interplay between the state, the appropriate beginnings of sort of a way to think through the ideas I already had about where the state and the individual run into each other. If Lord of the Rings gave me a model or illustrated a model for interpersonal fealty and allegiance, then it was Ayn Rand who gave me the words for individualism and who gave me the intellectual arguments, the basis of the intellectual arguments that I would later research and adopt on my own. And the interplay, it's worth an entire vlog another time about the interplay between personal fealty and objectivism, because I've run into objectivists who don't even understand it. But you look at Boromir and Aragorn, you look at these two guys in the woods, one of them a king and one of them a soldier and servant dedicating his life to that king, or who has dedicated his life to kings in the past. And you would think that neither of those men could be examples of individualism and objectivism. And you're wrong. You're wrong. There's nothing about personal fealty. There's nothing about swearing service. There's nothing about the fundamentals of a Bushido or samurai code of service to a lord that runs counter to objectivism. Birthright servitude does. The idea that you're born in service to that king and that you owe him your life simply because you were born there, that's absolutely counter to everything objectivism holds. But the idea that one would choose that service, there's no conflict there. There's no problem there. Every single one of those people, whatever, we'll talk about it another time. Suffice to say that from a Randian standpoint, Boromir had come to the conclusion that his ideals in the world, that his philosophy, his ethics, and the things he held valuable were best advanced if he gave his allegiance to Aragorn. Short though that allegiance may be, because he was already dying at the time. But had it happened earlier, he would have done it, and he would have spent decades in that service. Anyway, there you go. That is a Jabberwocky kind of drunken tour through Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead off the top of my head. And if you haven't read them yet, I would say go ahead and read one of them. If you like science fiction and want a more complete intellectual introduction to objectivism, go with Atlas Shrugged. There's, lasers and cold fusion and disintegrating rays and holograms and airplanes that do interesting things. It's a story of railroads and played out on a national scale. It is the classic science fiction what if that involves all of society. If you're looking for something a little smaller or more human, look at Fountainhead. Fountainhead is at its core a romantic novel, not meaning it's a love story, though it involves a fantastic and passionate love story at its core, but it's romantic in the sense that it's idealistic and ironic in its own way. Fountainhead tells the story of 6 people in a very personal way and how this philosophy affects them deeply. It doesn't talk about world-spanning political movements. It doesn't talk about government at large. Fountainhead talks about people and how these philosophies play out on an individual level, and to an extent touches on their interface with local government, city and state level governments. Anyway, for people that aren't necessarily big, thick book readers and don't love political philosophy for its own sake, I still think Fountainhead's the easier book to read in its own way. Try it. Don't be a wimp. If you've never read it, try it. If you've read it 5 decades or 3 decades ago and dismissed it or talked out of it, try it again. Just hit it up on Kindle. Try it and then look at the news. Look at the world around you. Look at the arguments that are being made. Heck, if you're an anti-Trumper, read that book and understand why we are pro-Trump, if you want to. Anyway, thumb up if you like these videos. Like and follow both this page and the herd watching page on YouTube, please. The herd watching channel over at YouTube, so youtube.com/herdwatching. Like and follow Writing Herd if you want a more daily repost of political and philosophical posts that are not necessarily my own writing. Writing Herd is sort of where I do my commenting, and herd watching is where I do these more long-form political videos when I'm doing political videos. And obviously this, my page here is where you're going to find these vlogs. Enjoy it. Check it out. Check out Instagram and all the rest of it. All right, folks, I hope you find this interesting. Feel free to discuss below. Though, honestly, if your only contribution to this is going to be, J.K. Lowell, all objectivists, I like that when I was 12 too, and then I grew up, whatever. You're welcome to make the comment, but if you think you're bothering me, you don't. If you think you have something new to say on the topic, you're not. And if you think simply attempting to... If you think you are marginalizing my thought process or in any way delegitimatizing it by bringing up the fact that this is something that becomes interesting to an enormous number of people at a time when they are first exploring their views of the world, and that it would be influential at that point, you're ridiculous. You're ridiculous. I don't know what to tell you. You haven't said anything I haven't heard before. Feel free to make your comment. I'll smile and wave, but whatever. You're irrelevant. Take it easy, guys. I got a long afternoon ahead of me. I got a lot of code to write. I got to get home and do all that stuff. But man, is it kind of mean and nasty out there. It's like just wet and cold. It's kind of drizzling rain that's sort of thinking about freezing. Jersey. Craziness. Take it easy, everybody.